And now it's time for our second reading. It's coming from the Gospel according to John. Matthew 24, verses 6 through 8 and 36 to 39. Matthew 24, 6 through 8 and 36 to 39. I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version. And please listen closely. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All this but the beginning of birth pangs. But about that day and hour, no one knows. Neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. For as the days of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. This is the word of God for the people of God. Now, I hope we heard that. If not, I suggest that during your leisure today, that you read Matthew 24. The whole chapter would be interesting, and Deuteronomy 20. I know we've been hearing about wars and rumors of wars. And seemingly we can't avoid it. Memorial Day is a time to honor those who are serving and have served in the military. It's also a day to remember those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice of our freedom and given their lives. When we celebrate Memorial Day on tomorrow, it doesn't mean we're agreeing with our government's decision and the wars, but that we are taking time to recognize those who are willing to protect us. And usually whenever I do see someone in uniform, I thank them for serving our country. And I tell them that I will be praying for them. I check their name on their chest if possible, and I repeat their name. I will be praying for Jones or Garcia, or whichever I may see. And I suggest that we do that. Those young people are dedicated to their task, and they aren't even sure what their task might be in a given day. Besides being a federal holiday, Memorial Day is the unofficial kickoff to summer. Government offices close, as do schools and businesses, and many Americans enjoy a 3-day weekend. So that's what Ross will be doing, and that's what Tristan will be doing, right? Cool. I guess the question is, why do we observe Memorial Day? Well, first of all, it has a very sober meaning. Originally called Declaration Day, and it has always been recognized. It has just evolved into Memorial Day, declared a national holiday by the Act of Congress in 1971. And its roots date back to the Civil War era, according to U.S. Department of Veterans. So it's been some time now that we have been celebrating, and justifiably so. It is just good to remember those who paved the way for us. We would not, believe me, have made it had there not been some war, some bloodshed, unfortunately. We as humans just like to take over. We as humans like to dictate. In fact, every now and then you have to put the brakes on in your own household. Like, hold up. Let's have a meeting. This is a us discussion. Sometimes we have to do that. But we know that God is always perfect in whatever he does. In his reign, and I hear people complaining about the rain. And if it snows, I hear people complaining about the snow. It just seems they just want to tell God how to do his work and when to do it. It's amazing. It's amazing. What does the word war mean? The title of the message, by the way, is "And There Will Be Wars." And there will be wars. What does the war mean? A state of armed conflict between different nations or states or different groups within a nation or a state. War is an organized and often prolonged conflict that is carried out by states and or nations. It is characterized by extreme violence, social disruption, and economic destruction. This is what we've seen over the months since February. On our screens, that's what we've seen. Violence, social disruption, economic destructions, building crumbling before our eyes. Armed conflicts of powerful states with isolated and powerless people are usually called pacification, military expeditions, or explorations. With small states, they are called interventions or reprisals. With internal groups, rebellions or insurrections. And we've seen an insurrection, have we not? Right at our nation's capital. I'm talking about war, and there will be wars. Such incidents, if the resistance is sufficiently strong, may be drawn out and extended, may achieve a magnitude that entitles them to name it war, because it has gone on, and it hasn't come to an end. There's been wars right here in the United States. The Revolutionary War featured battles that were fought as far south as Georgia and as far north as New Hampshire. The War of 1812 saw battles as far south as Louisiana. The War of 1812 raged on 2 years to 1814, and the British marched on Washington, D.C. and burned down the White House. We're talking about there will be wars. The Civil War would reach as far west as the Mississippi River. However, the majority of the war took place in the southern states. The only battle to be waged in a Union state was the Battle of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. The Mexican-American War was fought in what would be the future state of Texas, California, and New Mexico. The United States' involvement in World War II began when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, which was at the time a U.S. territory. There will be wars. And I'm talking about this because I'm connecting it with the celebration tomorrow of those who fought in wars, who served in uniform, and who gave their lives. And that is still in progress even today. We're getting to have statistics being recorded and reports being made in every news report at some point in time throughout the course of the day. The names given to war, the war has been called several different names. World War I, often abbreviated WWI. In conversation and writing is referenced with several other names that can be referred to as the First World War, the Great War, and the war to end all wars. Of course, that doesn't quite apply. But there have been wars before us. And when we look at World War II, it was by far the deadliest conflict in human history. It resulted in 70 to 85 million fatalities, and a majority of those being civilians. Tens of millions of people died due to genocide, including the Holocaust death of 6 million Jews. In addition, there was starvation, massacres, and disease. This is the outcome of war. The question is, why? War. Why do we have war? Why would there be wars? In Matthew, Jesus actually said himself, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars and see that you're not alarmed. He said, hey, chill. This is what Jesus is saying. John is quoting a statement made by Jesus. He said, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places, and all this is but the beginning of birth pains. Those of us who've had birth pains can relate. Those of us who have witnessed others having birth pains, well, you're on the outside looking in. But why? The answer is written so clearly in Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter. And this is why. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, and then a time to be silent, a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. The wisest of the writers, the wisest of men wrote that. Solomon. So now you know why we will have wars. Because there's a time for it. And when we see these wars about us, may we know that to give God the praise. And when you're around people who are talking about it, who do not know and understand, it's your opportunity and your responsibility to explain it. There's no purpose in hearing the word of God and you don't express it. In fact, Ecclesiastes goes on to say, what do workers gain from their toil? I've seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He's made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from the beginning to the end. He's just that great, that marvelous. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in their toil. This is the gift of God. And I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it and so that people will fear him. Wars are permitted. These times and seasons are permitted that people will fear him. These things come about, these seasons and times and periods of activities under the auspices of God's will is for the sake of people fearing him. If you think he's just a casual friend, you call him when you want something. No, that's not what he's expecting from us. He's given us life, health, and strength, and the opportunity for the gift of salvation. And all you want to give him is, 20 minutes on a Sunday? Search your heart. And I saw something else under the sun. In the place of judgment, wickedness was there. This is still in Ecclesiastes, mind you. In the place of justice, wickedness was there. I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed. That includes you and me and us and them. And then there's a part that's written in Ecclesiastes, the 4th chapter, regarding oppression and toil and friendlessness. Again, I looked and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressor, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. But rather than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. This too is meaningless. a chasing after the wind. And there will be wars. These are some serious stats that I wish to share with you. There have been 213 mass shootings in the United States this year. 213 mass shootings since January, in the last 5 months. There were 140 children ages birth to 11 have been killed this year to gun violence. 509 teenagers ages 12 to 17 lost their lives this year. From 2014 to 2021, there were 3,393 mass shootings. Ponder on that for a moment. And there will be wars. On Tuesday, May 24th, Salvador Ramos shot his grandmother in the face. Then he proceeded to the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, where he entered a classroom which was connected to another classroom. And you know the ending of that story. It's very sad. Then I asked myself, who invented the gun? Who was led to invent the gun? And I find out that there's a man by the name of Richard Gatlin. Certainly Mr. Gatlin's been gone a long time. And he became an MD, a doctor, but he didn't want to practice medicine. He wanted to invent things. And so just after the American Civil War broke, it is then when Gatlin realized the importance of a gun in modern warfare. Ha-ha, a bright light came on. And he realized that a gun is the only medium of warfare where one person can do the job of hundreds. Even if your opponents outnumber you, you still can win the war if you have a gun. So he started working on the invention of a gun. But the Chinese made the first gun. And gunpowder by it. But somehow, Richard got carried away. Even though he's buried and royalties are going to his estate and his families and all. And a lot of guns have been made since then. But I was really surprised that there are gun manufacturers in Arizona, in a place called Murfreesboro, Tennessee. In Sanford, North Carolina, there's a factory there that makes guns. Carson City, Nevada. Interesting. In Gunnison, Utah, they're making guns there every day. There's some facilities in Georgia and South Carolina. In Redmond, Utah. Guns are being made every day. And we can't get baby formula? There's a headquarters for the gun industry, the factories that make them in Florida. Also in Troy, Alabama. New Hampshire, and Connecticut. And so we see we have more than one factory at work making weapons of such. I'm sure some of them go to the military and some go to the police department and law enforcement and that sort of thing. But a good number go to gun distributors. A good number of them. But I was just saying that because they can't find baby formula. About 13.8 million Americans bought a gun for the first time in 2020 to 2021, according to a survey of retailers conducted by the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is a firearm industry association. Firearm sales are often linked to crisis, according to researchers from the Booking Institution and Wesley College. Sales initially spiked in March 2020 after the then President Donald Trump declared a national emergency over COVID, and the pandemic caused widespread economic and public safety fears, the researchers said. Sales also jumped amid protests over the May 2020 murder of George Floyd by the Minneapolis police officer. The researchers said an additional 1.4 million firearms were sold in the month following Floyd's death. And there will be wars. So let's look at the type of wars. There will be wars. There's the asymmetric warfare. Is a conflict between belligerents of drastically different levels of military capabilities or size. Then there's biological warfare, or germ warfare, if you will, and the use of weaponized biological toxins or infectious agents such as bacteria, viruses, and fungi. Then there's chemical warfare, involving the use of weaponized chemicals in combat. Poison gas is a chemical weapon. There's a cold warfare. There's a conventional warfare. We're talking about what types of wars. There's a cyberware. Involves the actions by a nation, state, or international organization to attack and attempt to damage another nation's information systems. There will be wars. There's an insurgency. Is a rebellion against authority when those taking part in the rebellion are not recognized as lawful combatant. And it's insurrection, if you will. That's the minimum of a war. Information warfare is the application of destructive force on a large scale against information, assets, and systems, against the computers and the networks that support the four vital infrastructures: the power of the grid, communication, financial, and transportation. That's a big thing. And there have been interruptions from time to time. There's the nuclear warfare. Nuclear weapons are the primary methods. There's total warfare, by any means possible. They just make up a way of doing it. There's the unconventional warfare. On civilian impacts made by wars have resulted in significant loss of life, along with destruction of infrastructure and resources, and we see that every day. It's going to take an awful lot to build up Ukraine, and it will never be the same. There's a war of systemic racism. The consequences of systemic racism are vast, from the bulging racial wealth gap, the political disenfranchisement, mass incarceration, racist immigration policies, and the list goes on. Disparities in health and education. We're talking about that there will be wars. And so let us not become alarmed, but let us learn how to pray from a warrior's perspective, as an intercessor. Ask God to teach you how to pray and when to pray. There will be wars. The Cold War, the Total War, the war of genocide, the class and caste wars, proxy war, Revolutionary War, the World War, War of Unification, wars of nationalism, war for resources, the Cyber War, war of religion, war of poverty, war of sexes, guys against girls, man against woman. The war of the sexes is ongoing. War on drugs, gun control, abortions, war with the pandemic, and the fight against the invisible pathogen. There will be wars. There will be wars, but we are equipped to stand firm, because no weapon formed against us will what? Will not prosper. And greater is he that's in us than he that's in the world. So we should walk through the maze of whatever it may be in peace and rejoicing that all things work together for our good, even the bitter of it. And there will be wars. A survey results that was placed before millennials who participate in the World Economic Forum Global Shapers Survey it was several people who participated. It was given to 31,000 people from the ages of 18 to 35 across the countries. And this is the result of the survey. The millennials can see already the wars they will face because of the now generation, the things we've done. Number one, they see a lack of economic opportunity and employment. They're concerned about safety and security and their well-being. The millennials are concerned about the lack of education that's available. They worry about the food and the water security, government accountability and transparency and corruption. They're concerned about that. They're thinking about the impact of religious conflict. They concern themselves about poverty. Even some of their peers are standing on corners with a sign that says, "Help me." Inequality, income discrimination. Even if they give you a point of a raise, rents increase, mortgages increase. These young people are almost having to come back home and stay home because of the cost of living. And they look at us and say, we had it better, and we did compared to what they're having to face. And somewhere along the way, perhaps we might have failed them. And they're definitely concerned about climate change, the destruction of nature. And they blame us. They can see that the wars will be there, waiting for them. Let's just look at the rules of the war. And I'm almost done. It was in Deuteronomy when God gave orders. He clearly told his people through the man of God, when you go out to war against your enemies and see horses and chariots and an army larger than your own, do not fear them. That applies when you walk into a doctor's office, into a courtroom, or even to a wedding. Wherever you feel you are at war with a situation that appears to be greater than you, remember whose you are. And speak with authority and walk in authority. And speak on behalf of others. We're defense attorneys. Wherever we see an opportunity to assist others, we're supposed to step in. We don't have to be like Superman and run and change. We can do it right there and then. Sometimes it's done in silent prayer. Sometimes it's done in intervention, just stepping in. I was at CVS the other day, and a young lady was there who had on her ethnic dress, and she was giving the pharmacist a copy of her document that required her meds. And I said to her, ask if they will make a copy for you. And she understood, even though she didn't speak English very clearly. And the pharmacist said they couldn't make copies. I said, use your cell phone. I pointed. She understood. She made a copy of the document with her phone, because she may never see it again. And she would probably have to go through the act of Congress to get it. She was grateful, I could tell. That's intervention. She was at war, and she couldn't defend herself. It was small, but there will be wars. And as you get older, some people are taken advantage of, and she was older. And it was my job to speak up on her behalf, to help her to help herself. So she learned the lesson. Now she knows she can make copies of whatever document she has, and she'll have it with her on her phone. But I just wanted to say that when we were reading this that has been written in Deuteronomy, it goes on to say, and before you engage in battle, the priest shall come forward and speak to the troops and shall say to them, listen, that's what he's saying. You are drawing near to do battle against your enemies. Do not lose heart or be afraid or panic or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to give you victory. If that's not enough, what more do you want? There will be wars. And you dare not go in without acknowledging the voice of God. God, what will you have me to do? How will you have me to stand? How will you have me to interact? And I know it's a spiritual thing and you don't see it. But as you grow in God, you will begin to see more clearly. And then when we look at Matthew, what Jesus has had to say, We see that you are not troubled, for all these things must come past, but the end is not yet. That's what Jesus is saying. You're worrying needlessly, because you're going to see this. There's going to be wars. The kind of things Jesus mentioned in this section are not the things that mark specific signs of the end. These things, like false messiahs and wars and famines and pestilence and earthquakes, have certainly marked man's history since the time of Jesus' ascension, but were not specific signs of the end. Only God knows the end. Jesus doesn't know it, but until such time, expect the wars, the earthquakes, the catastrophes, and if I must say, the unfortunate shootings, the massacres, the unexpected. That's why we have to be prayed and geared up in God. And that's why we have to fear him, take him seriously. He's not to be played with. If you haven't got a good grip, you better get one. He wants you to hold on to him like he's your last breath, because he will be. See that you're not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. All these things are the beginning of sorrows. All these things are the beginning of sorrows. All these things are the beginning of sorrows. Get used to being happy in God through his son, Jesus Christ, because that's where happiness will be. True happiness is in him, and there will be wars. I do thank you so very much for your undivided attention to the Word of God. It may not have been funny, it wasn't intended. God has already planned those things that would take place. This is his world, which is passing through. We're just passing through, mind you. We don't own anything, so don't get all huffy-puffy. Your name is on it, but you're a steward of things he's loaned us for comfort, for this journey.